This is Jed Disler, and welcome to the Piano Maven, your friendly podcast guide to piano recordings. You can subscribe to the Piano Maven podcast from my Substack page, and there's a link to do so in this episode's description. A paid subscription will get you a monthly download, plus Zoom meetings every few months, and I hope you will consider taking out a paid subscription to keep this podcast in production. The Australian Eloquence label issued two fascinating piano library box sets late last year, and I've been getting requests to talk about them. On my last podcast episode, we covered the 21 CD collection drawn from the Westminster and American Decca labels. And for this episode, we're going to be covering the piano library box set that's drawn from the Deutsche Grammophon catalog. It's a 22-disc collection, and there is a lot of wonderful material here. There's quite a wide range of artists and repertoire in this collection. Quite a few of the CDs are reissues of releases that came out in the late 70s and early 80s on Deutsche Grammophon's mid-price Concours series. This was a series mostly featuring live performances by primarily young competition winners, many of whom would go on to successful careers. And the collection also resuscitates some virtually unknown and long available rarities from the DG back catalog. So I'm just going to go through this box set disc by disc, and let's see what we get. Let's see, CD number 1. This is a disc with really legendary performances by the 18-year-old Vladimir Ashkenazy, recorded live at the 1955 Warsaw Chopin competition. This originally came out on a Heliodor LP, and I think some of these also came out on EMI. I don't really know the whole chronology or etymology of the labels these performances came out on, but in any event, what we have here are from the 1955 Chopin competition. We have the second concerto, the Ballade number 2. We have 2 etudes, 2 mazurkas, and the most scintillating and cohesive performance of Chopin's Scherzo number 4 that I've ever heard since the Horowitz 1936 HMV recording. And filling out this disc are 6 selections from Rachmaninoff's Etudes Tableau, Opus 33, with the pianist Lev Oberon. I don't really like his playing very much. I think he was a better chamber player than soloist. I find his playing in this Rachmaninoff set rather workaday and ordinary. I don't think it's all that special. Certainly not on the level as the young Ashkenazy. But on CD number 2, we have Boris Bloch in the first 2 of the Rachmaninoff Opus 33 Etude Tableau. And my God, what a difference. It's like feasting on caviar after having had a appetizer of white bread and mayonnaise or something. But this CD reissues the Concours disc featuring Boris Bloch. It's an absolutely stunning release, and I never thought I would see the day where it would appear on CD. I've treasured this LP for decades. It's just fantastic. And it begins with a really witty and highly profiled reading of the Beethoven Sonata number 6 in F major, Opus 10 number 2. This is just fantastic piano playing. And then there's the Rachmaninoff group I talked about. There's the Busoni Elegy, and then the Fantasy on Two Motives from Mozart's Marriage of Figaro that I talked about with Egon Patry, who recorded this on Westminster. And as wonderful as the Patry recording is, and it really, really is wonderful, this Boris Bloch version is just on a whole different level. It's light, it's quicksilver, it's so full of character and color, and I don't think I've heard this piece played better, to be honest. This is just a wonderful disc with a Boris Bloch. CD number 3 offers live performances by Michel Bloch from the 1960 Warsaw Chopin competition. And although Bloch didn't make it to the 1960 finals, his talent impressed Arthur Rubinstein, one of the jury members, so much that Rubinstein bestowed his own special prize onto the young pianist. And you can really hear why Rubinstein was impressed. I think it's instructive to compare Michel Bloch's 1960 performance of the Chopin Second Sonata, which is very exuberant and fresh, and then hear it next to the weirdly studied and super, super slow studio version that he made decades later for the OM label, which is one of the most bizarre recordings you've ever heard. It's like night and day. CD number 4 features the Italian pianist Dino Ciani, and this was an LP coupling of Debussy's Preludes Book 1 and the Children's Corner Suite, and they came out in the form of an LP test pressing that was never released. The Children's Corner eventually came out on CD in Deutsche Grammophon's complete 2018 Debussy edition, but the Preludes appear here for the first time, and I marginally prefer these performances to Ciani's Deutsche Grammophon remakes that did come out officially on LP and CD. CD number 5 contains Dino Ciani's studio recordings of Carl Maria von Weber's second and third piano sonatas, and these were reference versions at their time, and they're still really quite wonderful. CD number 6 features the pianist Mikhail Feiermann, and this is his fabulous concours debut recital. It includes a really wonderful Prokofiev Sixth Sonata. This is as commanding and idiomatic as one can get. And it also has one of the top versions of the Brahms Paganini variations that I know on disc. I would put this among my top 5 favorite editions. And filling out this disc is a live 1975 Queen Elizabeth competition performance of the Schumann Carnival with the 21-year-old Yuri Egorov. We just talked about Yuri Egorov on this podcast, and I think this interpretation is a little more communicative and spontaneous than the later studio recording that he made for EMI. CD 8 features the concours recital from 1978 by Stephen de Groot, and it contains Beethoven's Eroica variations and Schumann's symphonic etudes. I've always felt these performances were kind of hard-toned and expressively generic, and I think other recordings really do better justice to this tragically short-lived pianist, such as his Rager concerto with Michael Galen, and there was also a 2-CD set on Finlandia. There was a memorial release to Stephen de Groot. I think those do him better justice. This disc is okay, but it's nothing special. CD number 8 features Claude Helfer playing the Boulez Sonata number 2. This is a really fluent and very accurate performance. This recording totally fell between the cracks because it would be superseded by Maurizio Pollini's more famous recording from a few years later in the late 1970s, which I think has more ferocity and a wider dynamic range. But there's also a very fine Berg sonata with Claude Helfer on this disc. It's really good. It's not like the greatest Berg sonata ever, but it's a very strong performance. And also on this disc, he plays Mio's Le Carnaval d'Aix, D''AIX. How do I say that? Aix, my French leaves everything in the world to be desired. But this is a real romp through this piece, and Louis Frémaux is the conductor. CD 9 features a 1963 Schumann recital from Veronika Joachim, and she was the daughter of the conductor Eugene Joachim. When this disc was released, she was known then as Veronika Joachim von Moltke. And on this Schumann recital, she's playing the second sonata, the eighth novelette, the Fantasiestück Opus 111, and the Nachstück Opus 23. These are decent and serious and rather centrist interpretations. I don't think they're that special, especially when you compare them to her wonderful Clara Schumann recordings from decades later, or the amazing Bach Busoni Chaconne that she also recorded, which I think is one of the best versions of that piece. The 10th CD features the late Brazilian pianist Diana Casco. She retired from the public eye to raise a family, but it's really good that this disc came out because she really had talent, and it's good that her talent is preserved in these marvelous live performances from 1978 of the Liszt Sonata, the Chopin Polonaise Fantasy, and Chopin's Opus 10, number 10. And I'm really happy that this was preserved on CD. CDs 11 and 12 are studio recordings by the Hungarian-German pianist Julian von Karolyi. His 1952 Chopin ballades may not be the deepest ones in the shed, but I love his capricious, expressive gestures and little dabs of color here and there. I think even better is a 1964 recital of Chopin, and it has a wonderful andante spianato and grand polonaise with just fantastic double notes and the most seamless trills ever. And he manages to pull off a real breakneck tempo in the Chopin B minor sonata scherzos outer sections. And he gives one of the best performances I've heard of the Bolero. This has great flair and dazzling passage work. And he also plays the A minor Mazurka, Opus 17, number 4 of Chopin. This is just a gorgeously phrased performance that yields nothing to people like Horowitz and Paderewski, and that's the ultimate compliment. CD number 13 features the American-born and French-based pianist David Lively, and he brings clarity and intelligence and sophisticated musicianship to really everything he touches. This is a 1979 concours recital that I think is absolutely first-rate. He gives a really transparent and wonderfully articulated performance of Ravel's Le Tombeau de Couperin, and he hits on just the right tempos for each movement. And there's a wonderful Stravinsky tango and a Stravinsky piano rag music. And also, he plays the 3 movements from Petrushka. This is a fabulous, fabulous performance. And had this gotten the same attention that Paulini's did, it probably would have given Paulini a little bit of a run for its money. I mean, this is really a Petrushka on the highest level. CD number 14 features the 19-year-old Alexandra Lonkwitsch. And this is from 1979. It's a concours release, in that live series. And you get Schoenberg's 3 pieces, Opus 11, and the Schubert Sonata in A minor, Deutsche number 845. And it's really interesting to hear that at 19, Lonkwitsch was such a forthright and impetuous player, which is such a contrast to the sometimes rather micromanaged Schubert that you got from his EMI and Alpha recordings decades later. Okay, now we get to CDs 15 and 16. Some listeners will warm to the rough-hewn honesty of Ellie Nye's 1950s solo Deutsche Grammophon recordings of the Beethoven Moonlight, Pathétique, Appassionata, and Opus 110 sonatas. But I have to say, I generally find her post-war recordings rather prosaic and boring. These performances last appeared in the Deutsche Grammophon mono era big box set, where the producers edited out the Appassionata's third movement repeat that the pianist originally observed in order to squeeze all four of these sonatas onto a single disc. But here, the sonatas are spread across 2 CDs and the repeat was restored. So you get these sonatas as originally released. If you really, really want these performances. I mean, I can live without them, to be honest. CD 17 features the pianist Eva Pobloska's 1980 concours recital. This is a wonderful disc. It features Bach's variations in the Italian manner, and I think this proves that this pianist's special affinity for Bach harkens back to the start of what would be a long and distinctive career. She also plays Chopin's Scherzo No. 1. It's a beautifully turned out performances. And also both books of Debussy's Images are here. These are very beautiful and focused performances, and clearly she had it all from the beginning. CD 18 contains a 1979 concours release with the pianist Georges Louis Prat. It contains the Beethoven Sonata No. 28, the Schumann Toccata, and Ravel's Gaspard de la Nuit. I think this is still his very best recording, although he did make a recording of Spanish music for Decca in 2011, which is also really, really good. And he's a real keyboard dynamo, but he doesn't have to push really hard to make expressive points. This is a really, really good disc. Now on CDs 19 and 20, we have 2 studio recordings by a pianist whom I had never heard of before. Her name is Zola May Schaulis. She lived from 1942 until 2021. Her career started off pretty strong. In 1971, she won the coveted Naumburg Award, and then she became a protege of Arthur Rubinstein before making her 1974 Carnegie Hall debut. And like Diana Cosco, she retreated from concertizing in order to raise a family, although she did continue to play. Her 1971 debut disc includes an unpretentious and no frills and no repeats at all version of the Goldberg variations, and it's coupled with a really good Prokofiev 7th Sonata. I didn't even know about this Goldberg variations. You might remember that in our first season, I did a podcast episode where I said something like, Deutsche Grammophon only made 5 piano versions of the Goldberg variations. And at the time, I didn't even know about this recording. So I guess this is the 6th one. CD number 20 features a 1975 release, which is also music of Bach. It has 5 of the 7 toccatas. It never should have disappeared from the catalog. It is so good, and I didn't even know that this disc existed, but I'm so happy that these 2 CDs with Zola May Schaulis are included here. CD number 21 features Roberto Zidon's recording of the Charles Ives Concord Sonata. This kind of held sway on the European market as a viable and more easily available alternative to American editions by people like Alan Mandel and Gilbert Kalish and Ralph Kirkpatrick. Several critics at the time really praised this interpretation for its cutting-edge brilliance and its textual honesty, but I find it's a little astringent and one-dimensional, and for me, it hasn't held up as well as some of the others, and especially considering what the competition is like now, I don't think it's worn all that well, although you can't deny that he just plays the living daylights out of the piece technically. CD number 22, this is the last disc in the collection. This came out is an individual release on Eloquence a few years ago. It contains Eric ten Berg playing Rager's Telemon variations. God, this is such a boring piece. But he plays it very, very well. But what you really want this disc for is the recording of the Diabelli variations of Beethoven with pianist Paul Baumgartner. And my late friend Harris Goldsmith cited the Baumgartner recording among his top Diabelli variations choices, and I couldn't agree more. I reviewed this recording in detail for classicstoday.com, and I've posted a link to that review. Anyway, I think this is a fascinating box set, and I'm very happy that all the people at Australian Eloquence, Cyrus Mayer-Holmji, who is the artistic director of the label, and everyone working with him, brought this project to fruition in absolutely the right way. And the booklet notes account for every discographic nook and cranny. And there are wonderful annotations here by Jonathan Summers that give important contextual information for the recordings in hand. So I would definitely grab this box, as well as the Eloquence Westminster Decca box. These are collections well worth having. This is Jed Disler, and you've been listening to The Piano Maven, your friendly podcast guide to piano recordings, and I look forward to being with you for our next episode.